Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Enlightened Entrepreneur. This program is sponsored by World Outsourcing Solutions, the company that specializes in providing outsourcing services to businesses in the UK, Australia, Canada, and the US. Today's interview is a very special interview because I have a special friend of mine who is going to be talking to us about the mistakes that business owners often makes, but they need to avoid. And now, the lady I have on the show today has been in business for 15 years. So, 15 years is a long time. And along the way, you learn one or two things that you can avoid, or one or two things that makes business really, really, really work. So the lady I have on the call is Margarita. Now, it's Margarita Rozenfeld. Margarita is the CEO of Insight International, an award-winning organization development company providing consulting, coaching, facilitation, and training services to non-profit, corporate, and public sector, including with clients including Pew Charitable Trust, World Bank, Wells Fargo, Washington Humane Society, and many, many others. Welcome to the show today, Margarita.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Kai.
It's incredible that you could, spend some time to talk to the community here of the business owners here. So we really, really appreciate you taking your time to be with us today.
Oh, such a pleasure.
Awesome. Now, to get started, I know business owners often want to know your background so that they can relate with you better. Could you kindly talk to us about your background, how you got started in business, and the things that you're up to today?
Oh, absolutely. So I feel like I am one of those accidental entrepreneurs. I know that you've interviewed some other ones on your show. I started out really in international development. I am one of those go save the world types. My family immigrated to the United States when I was 12 years old, and so I've always had this love for languages and cultures and learning about different cultures. And so that's what I studied in school, and then just kind of meandered my way around the first few jobs, not really quite getting at what it is that I was passionate about, and ended up in a job that was just a really, really terrible fit for me. And I was searching for what I wanted to do with my life, and not quite clear after really being very focused since I was a child. And I met somebody at a party one day who asked me if I was a life coach, because I ask a lot of questions, and it apparently reminded him of his coach. And I said, I don't do sports. And he said, oh, you should talk to my coach. And so I thought, well, what do I have to lose? So I called her and realized, all the things that I do naturally anyway. And people have always come and talked to me at random places like grocery stores and bookstores and friends and friends of friends. And it's all the things that apparently I was able to make a living doing. And so I went to this coach training and just really realized very quickly that this was what I was supposed to do with my life. And immediately I decided I was going to experiment. I was young. I didn't know any better. So I jumped in and just started getting clients left and right. And I quit my job 10 months later and went full-time into my business. And at the same time, I launched an organization for entrepreneurs to mostly help myself with networking and, staying out of just feeling so alone and having a business. So I started Yes Circle and quickly grew that community of entrepreneurs. And as my work with entrepreneurs, my business owners, as businesses started getting larger and larger, they would ask me things like, wow, you're such a good coach. Could you facilitate this retreat for my team? And I'd be like, sure, I can facilitate. And how long do I have? And they'd be like, 4 months. They're like, great, 4 months is good. And then I would run out and get training and facilitation and be like, wow, this is really natural for me too. And another business owner would be like, can you train my people on customer service? And I said, sure, I can train business. How long do I have? It's 6 months, even better. So all these things that people were asking me to do turned out were things that I loved and, were really natural to me. And then, of course, I would go out and get tons and tons of training on how to do it better. And so it's now been, as you mentioned, almost 15 years. And now I work with a lot of nonprofit organizations, larger companies, non-governmental agencies, and it's just a really beautiful mix of helping organizations and people grow and grow together. So I feel really blessed to have had this path.
Incredible. I love the attitude that you have. You mentioned there that what have I got to lose? And I can see that in what you've just shared with us so far. Something keeps coming up, and you keep taking that opportunity, and you go and get training, and then you have another opportunity comes in. I find that to be true in many business owners, that they respond to the coming opportunities with that attitude which you have. What have I got to lose? What would you say to business owners who are sort of like very set in their ways? They want to do something, they don't want to explore opportunity that comes to them.
That's a good question. I feel like I think I was really young when I started my business. And I think that part of that attitude is definitely my personality. And part of it is potentially just not knowing any better, and just kind of
Right.
experimenting. I think at this point, I'm much more thoughtful and strategic about what I say yes and no to. And I
Right.
had to develop that over time. And I think I got lucky in that my business is incredibly intuitive and authentic to me. I think that depending on what somebody's business is and their personality, I think we all have different levels of comfort in, stepping up and just being on our feet, and making things up as we go. I think most people who are true entrepreneurs have that capacity naturally just to stay open to opportunities. And I would say that for people who are much more thoughtful and, planned, I really admire that quality. And I've tried over time to cultivate it more and more, and I think successfully so. Like I said, I'm much more careful about what I say yes and no to, just in the last decade even. And I feel like there is this openness that has to occur, and saying yes sometimes to things that are questionable or maybe outside of our comfort zones. But I think that we have to develop that over time. So when I've worked with clients that have had this really wonderful planning gene that I've had to cultivate, we've worked a lot on like how to be maybe a little bit more spontaneous or open to things in life outside of business. I had one client I remember who was an excellent, planner and like really, really, really deliberate and thoughtful, but just really, like you said, had a little bit of trouble exploring and playing with options. And he was, getting more into his business where that was more required of him. And I discovered in one of our coaching sessions that he loves to cook, but he can't cook without recipe. Like he really felt like he cannot cook without a recipe.
Right.
And one of my challenges to him is, okay, for the next 2 weeks, I want you to just put your recipes on the shelf. They're there for you if you need them, but I just want you to look at a recipe and then put it away and see what you can create. And he came back 2 weeks later and he was just elated. He said that it completely transformed the way he thought about his own creativity, and that he was able to just develop that openness very quickly, and of course with some trepidation at first, but that he saw these great outcomes and he was able to translate it then into his business. So I feel like our businesses are so precious and so we're so obsessed with them as entrepreneurs. Maybe that's not the best place to experiment at first, but maybe in the kitchen, or painting outside the lines, or taking a new route to work, or going to a new place to explore. I think that all of that does the same thing. It really allows us to develop our opportunities and abilities to stay open to things.
Incredible. I love the fact that you are sharing one of the success stories that you have, as I know for a fact that business owners want to know the success story that you have as a coach. You mentioned something about intuitive, that your business is around your personality. Would you expand on that for a moment?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like whenever we do something that's completely aligned with our values, we're going to be successful, because I feel like people truly resonate and feel our passion. And the last job, as I mentioned, that was not a good fit for me, it was truly out of alignment with who I was. I had to not only do things, but to sort of work in a way that was completely not who I am. I feel like in my business, it's all about people, and I am really passionate about helping people grow and develop. And so my company, that's what we do. And so it's easy to stay engaged and to listen to people and to help them think differently, because that's who I am. That's kind of how I live life. So I think it's really important for us to become self-aware about what things work for us and what doesn't work for us, so that whether we get a job or we start a business, that it is aligned. I mentioned in the beginning of the interview that I am an immigrant, and one of the experiences of being an immigrant, I'm not sure if you've had this, Yukai, but exclusion is a huge problem for new immigrants. I came to this country not speaking any English. My family did not speak any English. We didn't have
Right.
any money at all. And that experience of being isolated and excluded, I think, really shaped who I am.
Right.
And I think now in my business, my job is to help people feel included, to feel engaged, to feel like they're part of something bigger, and for leaders to learn how to engage and include, their whole workforce. So I think that based on personal experiences and personality, it is just so aligned with my values, with how I do life. It's easy, and another reason I feel so privileged and fortunate to do what I do.
Incredible. You know what you say about feeling excluded. I actually had that feeling, having migrated, from Zimbabwe to where I am. It's not easy in the first place. But what you touch on there is really important for business owners to do what is in alignment with them, and that way success is far much easier than when you're trying to go against the grain, so to speak. Or somebody says, look at nature. For example, if you pour water on the surface, it takes the least resistant path. It's the same thing, I think, in business. We take the least resistant path, something that is in alignment with you, and then you will see success, just like you are experiencing as well. Margarita, talk to me about those first few years in business. What kind of mentors did you have, or maybe something to work on your mind or personal development, anything relating to those early years, because it's a long time to be in business and maintain your integrity, which you have.
Yeah, I think the first few years was a little bit like throwing spaghetti against the wall and seeing what sticks. As I mentioned, I think part of it is my personality. Part of it is that because I was so young, I was, still in my 20s. I was in a business that, most people who are in this business are people who are like my age now or older. And so it's that was slightly challenging. Not so much. I mean, people kept hiring me, so I figured, okay, well, they must think that I know what I'm talking about. But I think that internally, I read a lot of studies around this imposter syndrome, where we feel like most successful, truly successful people have this imposter syndrome where we're constantly questioning ourselves. I don't think it ever goes away. And it was very prevalent, the first few years. So it was really important for me to be surrounded by people who were supportive and encouraging. And so, as I mentioned, I created this community for entrepreneurs, Yes Circle, which kind of grew rapidly. And through that, I met a lot of entrepreneurs of different kinds that were, again, the whole point of Yes Circle was that it was a supportive community of entrepreneurs where we could truly expose what was going on. Because, when you go to a business event and you ask people how they're doing, everybody's doing great. How are you? Oh, I'm great. I'm so busy. Are you busy? Yeah, I'm so busy. And so people have these conversations that are not always authentic because we're afraid to tell each other how it really is, which is I'm scared. I don't know, where my next client is coming from.
Right.
I'm flipping out because I have 100 things to do and I don't know which one to do first, and
Right.
whatever that challenge is. So I think that the first few years, I feel like we're just experimenting and see who I wanted to work with, who I didn't. And as I mentioned, I gravitated very quickly towards entrepreneurs and then, a lot of nonprofits and just really people who are very focused on their missions and doing good things for the world. That's kind of where I've been guided towards and ended up. And then I think a lot of my clients were kind of like mentors to me as well, because most of them were really advanced in their businesses, or they had other careers that were really successful before they launched. And I've always felt so inspired by what my clients were doing and their stories. And so that was amazing. And then people, like I said, I met through Yes Circle. I also read a lot. I went to a lot of forums and events where I could connect with like-minded people, because people in our lives, especially when we first get started, I didn't know a lot of people who owned businesses prior to starting my business. And I think it's a very different mindset to be a leader of a business rather than, being an internal employee or an internal leader. So all of that took several years to begin shifting. And, like any business, it has gone up and down and way up and, into valleys. And some of the same challenges, I think, continue rising, but hopefully as you learn and grow, you have less fear around them, you adjust more, you trust that, the things that have been challenges over the last few cycles have been resolved, and you learn how to do that. And I, I think that's kind of how it evolves.
Incredible. You were touching on many really, really good aspects. I'm writing notes as we speak, and I'm sure business owners in our audience are doing exactly the same thing. You touched on the Yes Circle, which is a networking group, and you did something very, very special, which I have found in my own business. Very important. Like if you want to learn something and if you want to benefit from something, go out and start that, and make it happen. And you will find that you begin to attract people that will help you in that regard. For example, your Yes Circle, and I now know as well that you run your own podcast as well to help other people.
Yeah, I actually was going to mention that. So this is one of the things I really want to be transparent about, and I've written about it. I did launch a podcast this year called Leadership Insights, and perhaps you can put that in the show notes if anybody is interested, because right now my business is primarily in developing leaders and organizations around leadership principles. And so for years, I have wanted to launch this podcast. I mean, like years, to the point where when I finally this year I decided, no kidding, I'm going to do this. I pulled up some articles that I had in my files, and it was like multiple years ago that I had this idea. But I think that fear and other types of obstacles that sometimes we put in front of ourselves got in the way. And this year I was like, no, this is what I'm doing. And the reason I launched the podcast, Yukai, is because, sure, of course, look where we are now. I just have found over the years that people have these incredible, incredible stories, and they share them with me as a consultant and a coach. And I just think these people are amazing, but they're not always the stories of, I was born, and I became successful overnight, and then I got really busy and business started falling in my lap, and, I now run the World Bank. I mean, it's really, most people's paths are so circuitous and they kind of go up through peaks and valleys, but that's not a lot of what we read or see. We just kind of, we open the Inc. magazine or we open the local business paper, and we see these examples, shining examples of these incredible leaders, some of whom are my clients. But the story about what it took to get there and some of the obstacles is not often told. And so I really wanted to have a forum to really have authentic conversations with leaders and really find out who are they and what makes them them. And I am really kind of incredulous of the kinds of things that people are willing to share. Had one guest who shared about his struggle with depression, and he had to drop out of a governor's race in Maryland, Doug Duncan, because of his battle with depression. And now he is, president of Leadership Greater Washington, and that's how we know each other. And he uses this story out in public to help other people feel just feel more connected and included, because in our society mental illness is so stigmatized, and so I feel like bringing these stories to the public, really helping people think about what it takes to become a strong leader, and sometimes just really sharing your story authentically. And so this podcast is kind of, again, another experiment that I just sort of decided after so many years, I'm going to do this no matter how scared I am. And just the incredible connections and the impact that it's having is really tremendous.
Incredible. Once again, I can see that trait in you that I see in many business, people who are doing so well, is let's keep moving forward. Let's find ways of helping others and make it happen. I'm going to ask you a bit about your personal journey, in running a business. Those early years, Margarita, you were faced with fear just like now. How did you overcome that? Or how are you overcoming the fear? Because it stays there. It's just a matter of finding a way of dealing with it.
Yeah, as I mentioned, I feel like surrounding yourself by a really strong community of other encouraging people who are doing amazing things. I find that I am so inspired by my friends and colleagues that are doing these incredible things that it's like when you talk to them, I feel like, oh my gosh, when I'm having a down cycle, which again, all of us have, and I still do, periodically, just talking to people who I know who have overcome their own struggles and are doing amazing things really inspires me, because then it calls me to the carpet. It's like, oh my God, you're doing this incredible thing. What am I doing? Like, I am sitting here being afraid. And so it's not about, shame or feeling bad, but it's about, really knowing people and having that exposure to people who are going to be authentic and be like, yes, I struggle too. And yet here I am. Listening to podcasts, to other people's podcasts has been amazing. You have some really fantastic episodes with inspiring people. There's a number of others that I listen to. I love the TED Talks, so sometimes when I'm in my sort of place of uncertainty or fear, I will listen to one that speaks to the topic that I'm struggling with. And just for me, I'm an extrovert, so being, like I said, around people and around people who do interesting things despite their obstacles has always been incredibly energizing for me. And honestly, over time, I've also had really powerful coaches. Like when I first quit my business, oh my goodness, I had this amazing coach who, I kept talking to about finding another job, and I kept talking about it. And she said one day, you know what? Here you are, you're coaching other people how to pursue their dreams, and you're really keeping yourself stuck, in a job that no longer serves you. What are you going to do about that? And I was like, what do you mean? And she said, if you're going to really do this, you better do it. And I was like, what? She wants me to actually do something about this thing I've been complaining about for whatever it is, 9 months. Right. And so having a coach that really sees something for you that you may not see in yourself, or really stretches your boundaries and helps you think differently, makes you cook without a recipe, makes you take a new route to work, makes you put a date on your calendar when you're going to quit your job, which is what my coach did to my terror. I think all those things are really important. I think that sometimes when we're feeling badly, we keep ourselves isolated, because it's scary to be vulnerable with other people and to say, oh my goodness, this is not working for me, or I'm scared. But I feel like, just really getting out there, or having a few people, if that's what we're comfortable with, that we truly trust, that have our best interests, but also are not going to just, enable our fears, but will really kind of stretches lovingly beyond them. I think those are really crucial, and I think that's what's helped me over time as well.
Incredible. It's quite obvious to me that you've walked the journey and you're on this same journey. I would like to switch gear for a moment, Margarita, if I may. Start talking about the mistakes that you see business owners make, especially in their early years of running their organization. In your experience, what mistake would you consider one that is majorly committed by many business owners that they can avoid?
Oh my gosh, one. I would say that it's probably similar to both business owners and now leaders of other types of organizations that I work with. I think that sometimes people will become leaders, whether it's of their own business or an organization, because they were really fantastic at that technical thing that they were doing.
Right.
Maybe they were like a great baker and they opened a bake shop. Michael Gerber writes about this baking example in E-Myth Revisited, a really fantastic book on on entrepreneurship. And they become then they run a bakery, but they may not have the management skills or the entrepreneurial skills that it takes to run that particular kind of a business. And so in organizations, I see the same thing. Somebody is a fantastic policy analyst, and so they're made like a head of a think tank, but nobody really thinks about, like, do they have leadership experience? Have they been trained well on just what it takes to run a business that employs people? And so I think it's really important for us as business owners or as leaders to be very honest with what our competencies are, and there's no shame in not being good at everything. None of us are. So I think it's important to really take a look and say, wow, I'm really strong at these things, and here are some things that I could really use some help with. Maybe I'm not great at delegating, so maybe that's an area I can grow. Or maybe I'm a really great entrepreneur, but I don't have a ton of experience in planning. So maybe I should hire somebody to help me with that, or maybe I can hire someone, internally for that. So I think that one of the mistakes that entrepreneurs and leaders make is we sort of have sometimes this optimism and confidence to take on absolutely everything all at once, without gauging of what are the things we're the strongest in and where do we need to leverage other people's strengths or get additional training or support. And so I think that it's the thing that makes leaders and entrepreneurs amazing and brilliant, like this kind of confidence and optimism. And also at the same time, it can be a bit of a downfall if we're not addressing some of those blind spots and weaknesses.
Incredible. Margarita, you're saying some really, really great stuff here. Thank you so much. Now, let's talk about you. How did you come to identify the area that you were not so good in your own business? And what were the necessary steps that you took to get somebody on board, or maybe a software or a system on board? What did you do during those early years?
Well, some things I was very clear about what I'm not good at. I'm very good at things like budgeting and managing money, but I'm not great at all the things like financial forecasting and things.
Right.
And I already talked about my weakness around some of that more financial planning. So that was very clear to me. I have known that forever. And so, clearly I outsource things like accounting, and, like I said, I had a business coach who helped me with some, business modeling things. And so some things I was aware at, but, there are other things that I feel like are a little bit more insidious, which is again, why and again, I'm not saying get a coach because I'm a coach. I mean, I'm just saying that because it has been completely life-changing for me. And so it's like having somebody who can be a mirror and reflect back some things that we're not seeing. One of the things that I remember one of my coaches said to me one day that was totally life-changing is, she said, and she was very positive about it. She said, wow, you're like a really good problem solver. And I said, well, thank you. I think so. And she said, you're such a good problem solver. Sometimes I see you putting obstacles in your path so that you can solve them and feel good about it. And I was like, that is brilliant. I totally do this. Like I create problems unconsciously, but unless somebody pointed that out to me, it's not something that I would have ever really seen because we're all so caught up in our own, like in our own things. So part of it is I think most of us like have a level of awareness and then it's like, yes, I'm going to outsource this. But then I think that even more so, it's about having mechanisms in our lives that will catch things that are our blind spots that we may not find ourselves. And, people that are our employees or our friends, they mean, first of all, it's not their job to tell us these things. And second of all, there is a clear differential of power for people who are employees or our peers. And also, so they won't tell us most of the time. And then, with our friends or our family members, they love us. So they may either not see it the same way or they just, they wouldn't tell us because they care about us and they are afraid to hurt our feelings. So again, I think having mastermind groups, coaches, people who will really serve as our honest mirror to those blind spots and help us, to help us identify them and then tackle them is super important.
Incredible. I'm so glad I just got, let me get my glass of water for a moment. When I'm listening sometimes, and then I want to start talking, something happens. But I'm so glad that you mentioned, the role of a coach, because I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing if I didn't have a coach. Having done this for the last 8 years, I can see the milestone that my organization has had to go, that we experience as a direct result of having a coach. And I'm glad that business owners in our communities getting to hear such information as well from somebody else who is experiencing great success. Let's talk about the second mistake that you see business owners make.
I feel like there are so many mistakes that we make. I'm trying to think of my own mistakes. So we talked about potentially, doing kind of everything at once. I think that the other part is we fall so in love with what we do. Sometimes we forget to stop and check in with our customers to make sure that what we're doing is still relevant and important to them. So one of the things I discovered over the last few years is, I really love doing leadership development programs, and I still hear from, from students that I had, I don't know, 5, 10 years ago, occasionally, and Facebook is great for that, about all the things that they learned and the ways that they're still applying it. And so it's so much fun, and I love doing that. And I also discovered over, last several years that my clients have been having just challenges, planning, and so strategic planning has over the last, I don't know, 5 to 10 years come really to the forefront of my industry as something that people really need help with before they can even identify that leadership development is needed or other types of development in their organization. So I think being attuned and listening to what our customers are asking for is really important, because otherwise we get so caught up in the thing that we're doing. Sometimes we just keep doing it, and in some cases that's perfectly appropriate. But as we do our own strategic planning and think about what, looking at our strengths and weaknesses, we already talked about that, but also what are the opportunities and maybe risks in our environment that will either help us grow our businesses, or we need to kind of shift and adjust with the times. So I think that that's something that is also really important for all of us, is just that planning and thoughtfulness and being very deliberate about what we do.
Incredible. Thank you so much for sharing that, Margarita. As we're coming toward the end of our time here together, Margarita, I know for a fact that business owners would love to connect with you at some level, or maybe use some of your services. Can you talk to us about insightsinternational.com for a moment?
Sure. I mean, they can always go to my website, and I imagine that you will put that in the show notes. It's Insight, like with a C, INCITE international.com. And my podcast is accessible from that. If you would like to hear from other leaders who are from different kinds of industries doing amazing things, it's also on iTunes. And if I could ever be a resource for your listeners, I am never attached to being the right person to help any given individual or organization, but I have a huge network, and I'm always happy to be a resource, to provide resources as far as reading materials or podcasts that I've listened to and have been helpful to me. So if anybody ever has a question, they're totally welcome to email me through the website, and I'm always happy to be a resource.
Incredible. And are you on social media at all?
Yes, I am on Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitter. It's Insight Yes on Twitter. And again, I know that you post these things so that people are welcome to link in and link up. And again, I just want to. I just want to provide resources to people that they need. So, please don't hesitate to reach out.
Incredible. One thing I like about you, which is quite evident, I'm sure, to other business owners, is how freely you share your knowledge and what you've learned in your life. And we live in a free economy, and when you share more, like you have done, people get help, and of course, they find their way to wanting some more. Margarita, really appreciate you being here with us. Do you have any final words for entrepreneur? Maybe something that I haven't asked, but you feel very strongly that business owners in our community may find it helpful.
I would just encourage everybody to reach out and find people that are supportive and heart-centered and are really out for each other's success. I think that this is a really it can be a lonely journey, and I think it doesn't have to be. And so I think by reaching out and finding like-minded people, it will just make the journey so much smoother and more energized and inspired. So I think that's really important.
Incredible. I nearly forgot about to ask you this, actually, Margarita. As a business owner today, what does your day look like?
I think the good news for both my personality, I think for my personality is like no day looks like any other day. I think, every day could look completely different. Today, for example, we have this wonderful interview in my morning in Washington, D.C. And then I have a whole bunch of stakeholder interviews for strategic planning session and some coaching calls. And later this week, I'm facilitating an offsite for team building. And another day, I am facilitating an offsite for leaders to connect and think strategically together. So I feel really blessed that every one of my days looks just so different from each other, and it kind of keeps me going and energized.
Incredible. And what it makes you really, really happy, maybe not business wise, but things that keeps you moving forward and, look forward to tomorrow, or if it's in the morning, excited to be alive.
Oh gosh, that's such a good question. Well, I love what I do. You may hear this in my voice. I'm really passionate about it, and so that makes it easy. We had a 3-day weekend, and I had to do some work during the weekend, and it was totally fine because you know what? I love what I do. And then I also really balance it out. So I am totally addicted to travel, and I travel internationally or around the U.S. as often as I can. So just having completely unplugged time where my brain can, my brain that works all the time, I just kind of keep it unplugged and explore and just do things for me. And again, spending time with people who are big thinkers, who care about other people, and really have amazing, inspiring ideas. That's just really energizing. So I do a lot of those things as well.
Oh, beautiful. Last question, I promise this is the last one. I know because of our time. If maybe 50 years from now or maybe 100 years from now, and you're gone, what would you be most happy that people will remember you most about? What would you say? You're gone, and
yeah, thank you. I got
is a
that.
beautiful
I
place.
really got that. I appreciate it. I hope people will remember me as somebody who really cared and wanted to make a positive difference in the world and brought people together who should have known each other and, gained more strength and momentum. I sometimes think of my job like as the first domino. You know how like there is a domino formation and then you push one domino and all the other ones just kind of fall into formation. And I feel like, there's only so much impact any given one of us makes, certainly some people more than others. But if I can kind of leave a legacy of, touching other leaders and having them inspire change and transformation. And so in the organizations that I currently work with, I hope that 100 years from now, they are making even stronger impact and they're making, an even bigger difference because perhaps something I did to help their cultures become stronger, or their leaders to create an environment where 100 years from now, they still hire amazing, strong, committed individuals. I think that will be a life well lived.
Incredible. There you have it, business owners. If you want to work with somebody who cares for your business, who wants to be remembered as somebody who cared, you have to work with Margarita. Thank you so much, Margarita, for sharing that. In fact, I was asked the same question 2 years ago when I started. I had never given it a thought is how I wanted to be remembered. I know it's far-fetched, but it made me change the way I was doing my life, because how I want people to remember me, affects how I'm doing things right now. And hearing you say you want to be remembered as somebody who cared, who brought people together, is what drives you when you are working with clients. And it's a marvelous quality in you. I would like to work with you because it's really what defines you, on a subconscious level. And when you're looking into my business, I'm hoping business owners are listening to this as well. You're looking at it from that angle that this is when I'm gone or when I'm no longer working with this client 2-3 years from now, I want them to know that I've brought them together. I brought people together. I was caring. That's what drives you. And I know for me as well, that's what drives me to make a difference, make things happen, and as we do that, it literally comes out of us. And for those business owners, you are considering working with somebody, if you ask the kind of question, it reveals to you their core values. So once again, Margarita, I think you've been amazing today on this show, and thank you so much for sharing, generously what is important to you, and how you want to help business owners. We hope to have you again on the show sometime soon.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Incredible. And for you, if you're listening, I encourage you to go to the site www.insightinternational.com to connect with Margarita. Alternatively, you can reach out to our team that is supported World Outsourcing Solutions for any question that you may have, and we'll certainly put you in contact with any of our guests that we've had on the show ever since we started. Thank you for being here with me, and I wish you a great day. In fact, I encourage you to implement all that you've learned, or maybe just one, that simple nugget you got from Margarita. Just implement it, and you implement another one, you'll be amazed at how your business is going to turn out. Live with passion, whatever you do. And thanks again for being here with us, Margarita.